Hi, welcome back to Christine's Home Affairs. I have been inundated with bags and it's all my own doing. Today's video is going to be a crossbody satchel. In my recent top 10 video, I showed you a satchel that I had made out of an error that I had made for different bags that I was making. And everybody liked the idea of this bag being a satchel. Now, I have made something like this that I showed you for my boys before Christmas. It was a little bit wider than this. Many of you have asked for a video of this bag specifically. I also had a couple of recommendations as well. And because I had suggested this might be good as satchels for teachers, the suggestions I had had from some viewers were to put pockets in there because the educators are wearing lanyards and keys to their classrooms and things, and they want one specific pocket to throw their bits in and then another big area to throw their computers and stuff like that into. So I've taken that on board, and the video we're doing today is for some crossbody satchels. Let's show you this one here. And there's a zippered pocket at the front. Then you have got the zip going in all the way around the top. And there's also a pocket on the inside as well. And added to that, I've put a shoulder strap on there. So this is a completely adjustable shoulder strap. You can wear it across your body or just across your shoulder, or just carry it around any way you like. You can actually put this over a pram as well, which leads me to the other suggestion somebody had made, was that these might be perfect as nursery bags or nappy bags. Nappies in Australia are the same as diapers in the US. So that's what we're going to do today. We are making a crossbody satchel with a zippered pocket at the front, another pocket on the inside. It'll have the shoulder straps. And before we get onto the video, I've got something to show you. I got mail today, and guess where it's from? YouTube. So I haven't opened this up yet. I thought we could open this up together and see what's inside. Can you guess? I know exactly what it is, and I'm sure most of you that are familiar with YouTube and the way they work will know exactly what's in here as well. All right, the big unveiling. I haven't looked at it. I haven't seen it yet. I think you guys deserve to see it first. All right, can you see it? Because I can't. Oh, it's a letter. All right, I'm still not going to look. I'll let you guys look first. I'll remove that letter. All right, can you see it now? Oh, look at that. It's my YouTube play button. So now it's my turn. How can we do this without the glare? Can you see my curtains in the background? This is my YouTube play button. It's presented to Christine's Home Affairs for passing 100,000 subscribers. Thanks a lot, guys. I owe it all to you. As soon as Chris puts a nail up for me, this will be going on my wall somewhere. All right, time to make some bags. At the end of it, I'm going to tell you how many I've made, because there's lots, also how long it's taken me and what I'm going to price them out at. All right, here's everything that we're going to need for these crossbody satchels. I have one piece of fabric for the internal pocket, and I'll be stabilising that with a medium weight cotton interfacing. I have another piece of fabric for the external pocket. That doesn't need to have any interfacing. This is the outer bag. It's a big piece of upholstery fabric. I've got one whole piece there. If you've got directional fabric, or if you'd like to use directional fabric, or even if you don't have big enough pieces, you can halve this measurement and add 1 centimetre on each piece for seam allowance and cut 2 pieces instead. If I remember, I'll write that in the materials list. If you do use one piece of fabric, you can't have a directional fabric because the other side of the bag will be upside down. On the back of this fabric, I've got some parlan, which is a lightweight fusible fleece. This is it here. It's just a very thin fusible fleece. I have another piece of interfacing. This will be to stabilise my lining. This is also a medium weight cotton interfacing. I've got a piece of fabric for the lining. I will cut this in half and sew it back together, so the cutting instructions will have this as 2 pieces. And then we need a long zip for for the top of our bag, a short zip for the front, and we need some webbing for our handles and our tabs. Attached to our tabs we'll have some D-rings, then we need some swivel clips and an adjustable slider to put onto our shoulder straps. And that should be just about all. If you sew labels onto your products, I've positioned mine at 4.5 centimetres from the top edge of the fabric. Okay, the first thing you want to do is take your outer piece of fabric and fuse the fleecy stabiliser to the wrong side. Once you've done that, you can set that one aside. If you prefer something with a little bit more stiffness, you can use a Decaville or even a Peltex. That'll make the bag sit up nice and rigidly. This is the internal pocket. We've got our iron-on interfacing, which will go on half of the fabric. So we'll fold this fabric in half. I've got wrong sides facing up. And then I'm going to place my interfacing over that centre fold, and that'll leave about 1/4 inch gap around the outside. Fold that in half again, and we can press that. And then take your lining piece. I've mentioned that I've got mine in one whole piece. That's because I like to manage my time really well. So with your lining and your interfacing for your lining, if you've cut it into 2 pieces, you'll fuse your interfacing to the wrong side of your lining for both of them. And in my case, I've just kept mine one long length. So I will iron that interfacing to that whole piece, and I'll cut this fabric later. Let's go and do all of that now. Once everything has been stabilised, we can set these aside. We're going to be working on our shoulder strap first. If you prefer to make your own handles, you can do that by having a 4-inch or 10 centimetre wide piece of fabric that is 70 inches or about 1.7 metres long, and you'll fold the edges together and then sew down both long edges. That will give you something that is about 1 inch in width. I always like to use my webbing for the handles. It saves a lot of time, and these are really super strong. I'm going to cut 6 inches straight off that, which is about 15 centimetres, and then I'll cut that in half. We'll grab the 2 D-rings, fold the tab in half, and we can set these ones aside for the moment. These will go onto our bag later. We have 60 inches left, which is about 1.5 metres. We can put our swivel clips and adjustable sliders in place. So with the adjustable slider, I'll pop my webbing in on one side, bring that over to the other side, pull it out a little bit, and then this raw edge here, I'm going to fold it over once, move the slider across a bit, and then I'm going to fold that over another time. I'm going to sew 2 rows of stitching straight down the side there, and that will secure that in place. So once again, just feed the fabric through, fold it over once, and when you fold it over the second time, you're hiding your raw edges. We'll go and do that now. For this whole project, I'll be using a universal number 90 or size 14 machine needle, and my seam allowances are 1 centimetre or 5/8 of an inch, unless I tell you otherwise. So I've got the double fold underneath. I'm going to triple stitch across the width of the webbing, and then I'll go as close as I can to that metal bar, move that out of the way, and I'll repeat. And that stitching's never going to come undone. Once you've secured that in place, find the other end of your webbing, grab one of your swivel clips, place that over the end and feed that through. You want the swivel section of the clip to sit on the side that doesn't have the fold. So we've got our fold over here. All you need to do is just turn this around to the other side, and then what we can do is turn that upside down, find the other end of the webbing, keeping it all nice and flat, bring the other end of the webbing through the folded side, and then back through again. So what you've got here is the folded edge tucked in underneath. and you've got this end of the swivel clip nicely secured in place. Now you can just keep this nice and flat. Grab the other end again, grab one more swivel clip. We're going to place that over the top. I'm going to fold that edge under, bring the slider across, fold that under again, and that's ready to be stitched in place. Before you do that, you do just want to make sure that everything is nice and even. So we've got the folded edge of our webbing to the inside of our loop. So that comes up around over your adjustable slider, still nice and straight along here, and then bring the webbing through your clip around and fold it over so that you've got the raw end tucked in underneath. And if you have a look at that, the folds are neatly hidden away on the inside here, and this one will be nice and neat. We'll go and sew that one in place now. So there we go, that's our adjustable shoulder strap all done. We can set that one aside and get started on our bag. Let's take the internal pocket. One side of it has fusible interfacing on it and the other side is blank. We'll fold that in half with the printed sides or the right sides together. So that means you're going to have the fusible stabilizer on the outside. We've got the folded edge along here. We'll sew from the edge of the interfacing here with the back stitch down to the corner, turn your work and come along here. We'll back stitch around about here, leave a small opening, back stitch here, keep on going, and then you can sew all the way up to the other end as well with the back stitch. We'll do that in a moment. Next you grab your lining, and if you've got two separate pieces, then you're going to bring the two edges together and sew across here, leaving an opening there, and then sew across here. If you've kept yours in one whole piece like I'm doing here, I'm going to bring my raw edges together and I'll sew with a back stitch from here into the center here and leave a really generous opening. We'll take these two over to the machine. So I've got the folded edge across the top here. This is the internal pocket. Stop here with a back stitch. Leave that opening. And I forgot to change my thread. Whilst we're at the machine, we're going to trim our corners. And we can turn this the right way out. And you'll poke out your corners and then top stitch. Once you've turned it the right way, we've got our little opening at the bottom here. We're not going to worry about closing that just yet, but we are going to top stitch the other long edge. And we can set that aside. I've got my lining pieces now. So I've got the long edge there. I'm going to sew right across, leaving a big opening in the center. We'll back stitch here, move on forward, I've got my opening along the bottom here. I'm just going to fold that edge up and finger press a crease just to provide a memory for this when I close up the bag at the end. It'll make it easier to pinch the fabric together and close it up. Now if you've left your fabric whole, then you'll have the fold along here, the raw edges sewn at this end. What I'm going to do is just press this along the folded edge. I'm just going to slice straight across. So keep the fabric nice and straight and flat. And if you had started off with two separate lining pieces, this is exactly how yours is going to look now. You would have joined the two pieces together and you would have your opening in the center. So it's just a quick way of doing your lining without having to worry about measuring and cutting an extra piece of fabric. When you're doing batch sewing of lots of bags, it does actually help save a lot of time. So now that that is done, we want to put a pocket inside the lining. So it doesn't matter at this stage whether you use this side or this side of your lining. What we'll do is fold the fabric in half, mark a crease. So there's my little opening underneath. This is the centre of my fabric. We'll find the centre of our pocket. And we'll line up the centre of our pocket with the centre of our lining fabric. And you're going to position that 3.5 inches or 9 centimetres from the top of the fabric. Then you can pin that in place. We've got the opening of the pocket along the bottom here. We'll take this to the machine now. We'll sew from here, down, across and up again. Reinforce the top edges. And when you stitch across here, you will close up that opening. It's up to you if you want to reinforce the corners at the bottom. I usually like to. Alright, so that pocket is in place now. If you're going to make these bags and you decide you don't want to put a pocket at all, then you won't need to have the fabric for that, but you also won't need to worry about interfacing this lining fabric either. So if there's not going to be a pocket on the inside, don't bother interfacing it. It really doesn't need it. The only reason I've put it on at all is so that the pocket has something more secure to be stitched onto. I'll set the lining aside for the moment. We need our outer fabric and we need the pocket piece for the outside of the bag as well. With our pocket piece, we've got 11 inches across this way and 10.5 inches across this way. From this edge here, we're going to measure 2.5 centimetres or 1 inch. And then you can mark that line going across. From the outside edge here, we're going to measure 1 inch or 2.5 centimetres. Just mark a line there. So from the outside edge here, we've come in 1 inch or 2.5 centimetres. And from this first line we've marked, we're going to measure 5/8 of an inch or 1.5 centimetres. And we'll join those lines. So we've got a rectangle here that is 5/8 of an inch wide. And then you want to find the centre of that. So you can just eyeball it if you want to. If you're using a regular dress zip, you might want this opening to be a little bit smaller. It doesn't really matter, it'll just have a wider gap, that's all. Join those lines. Hopefully you can see all of that. So we've got our outer rectangle, we've got a line marked down the centre, and from the corner we're going to mark a triangle or an angled line. And we'll do the same on the other side. And it doesn't really matter how far out that triangle comes because this is a cutting line along the centre. So the distance in here is where our zip is going. You want to double check that measurement. For me, I've got about 8 3/4 of an opening. So I want my zip to be at least 9.5 inches in length. Now with these lines marked, we can take our outer fabric. I've got my label at the top here, so this is going to be the front of my bag. I'll fold this fabric in half and find the centre. This is my centre right about here. I want to line this section of the fabric up 3 1/4 inches from the top. This top edge here will be 3 1/4 inches from the top of the fabric. I've made a few marks across here. I've got the centre marked there. Fold this in half and we'll mark the centre, and I'll line up that centre mark with my centre line, and I'll bring the raw edge of the fabric up so that it is 3 1/4 inches from the top of the fabric, and that 3 1/4 inches is 8 centimetres. We can pin this in place now, and we'll go back to the machine, and we're going to sew on the marked line of this rectangle now. We're not going to sew along the centre or on the diagonal, just the 2 outside edges and the short edges. I'm not going to start right at the very end. I'll come in a little bit because that way I can come around and turn and finish along the top edge. Gives me a neater finish. I'm going to back stitch when I get to the corner, just 1 stitch. Go forward, turn, forward 1, back, forward, when I get to the next corner I'll go back 1, forward, and repeat until I finished all the way around. Okay, with that done, we can remove our pins. You're going to need your iron. I've got my ironing mat behind my fabric, and what I'm going to do now is fold this fabric back to the stitching line and press it. Then I'll take the side edge, I'll fold that over and press it. I'll do the same on this side. And then I'll flip this back the other way, and this edge here I'm going to flip forward or down, and I'll press that as well. I'm using a Teflon sheet because the label that I've got on here is synthetic and it will melt, and I think the fabric is synthetic as well, so that will also melt. So I've set a crease on all 4 edges of this fabric. The mark I've made with a pen earlier has disappeared because of the heat from the iron. There's my stitching line just on the outside here. I now need to cut across the centre of the fabric. The stitching ends up here. I want to cut a point, and I'll do that on this side as well. And just cut straight down that line. Fold the fabric in half, and with your scissors you can make a nick in the centre, and then you can cut up to the triangle, and now I'm going to cut diagonally across to the corner of my fabric or the stitching line. I'm going to cut up to the stitching line but not through it, and the closer you can get to your stitching line, the better your corner is going to sit. Now what we can do is feed this fabric through the hole, bring it all out through the other side, and these edges will need to be folded under as well. So if you want to, you can just use some clips to help manipulate the fabric or guide the fabric so that the lining of the pocket is behind and all you see is your upholstery fabric on the front. Fold that pocket down. So once you've folded the edges under, this is what you're going to have, is an opening along here. It's not going to be so distorted though, it'll look much nicer than that. These clips are just to hold it in place so you can see what we're going to do. Because this is upholstery fabric, it's actually quite bulky along here, and I've got a trick I like to use for that. On the other side, you want the pocket sitting down nice and flat, and you want these corners sitting nicely as well, without any little pleats in the corner. If you find you've got pleats or the fabric's pinching, it's because you haven't cut close enough to the corner, and you might just need to snip in a little bit closer. I'm going to remove all of these clips and show you what I prefer to do when I'm making these pockets. It saves me a lot of time. I've got double-sided tape. Next to the seam ripper, it's a girl's best friend. So I'll fold my fabric out of the way, and this flap here needs to sit down over that stabilizer. So I'm just going to pop some double-sided tape over that, remove the paper, and then I'll fold that edge under and make sure that the lining is to the inside and that the outer fabric is sitting nicely on the outside, and I don't have the lining peeking through when we're looking at it from the other side. So this helps settle everything down, and it helps prevent you from burning yourself with the heat of the iron. So that's already in place. I'll do the same on this side, and then this flap here will be folded over in exactly the same way. So the lining will sit to the inside of the pocket, and by securing that tape, you're just helping keep everything nice and even without having lots of pins and clips and bulky bits in the way. That double-sided tape just helps everything sit there. If you want to, you can do the same on the outside edges. I usually don't do this because I find that it sits by itself, but for this video I'll do that now. So if you just pull that fabric away from the opening, I can see that the outer fabric is just peeking through on this side, so I'm not going to have any lining showing through on the wrong side. So there's our opening that's somewhat secure at the moment. All we need to do is put in our zip. We need a slider, so to put my zipper pull on, all I need to do is separate the teeth. Now my teeth are nice and even along the top. I don't need to chop anything back. With the curved edge facing me, I'll pop one side on, and then put the other side on as well. Push down, and you'll hear a click. That's in place. That's still nice and straight along the top there, so that hasn't kinked any of the teeth. And I'll just let that sit in the middle. I want the curved edge of my slider facing my left. I'm going to use some more double-sided tape. I'll run that along the outside edge of the zip. This double-sided tape is wash away, so it's not going to gum up the machine or your needles. If you can't find it where you are, I do have this on my website, so you can safely use that with your machine and it doesn't gum up anything or affect your bobbin. Okay, with the curved edge to my left, I can take the paper off, and then I can line this up around the opening. So now you just want to manipulate the fabric so that double-sided tape holds it securely in place, and you can just lift it up out of the way. And when you're happy with the placement, we can sew all the way around here. As with all my zips, whenever I go over the zipper teeth, I always triple stitch. Let's sew that in place. Once again, I'm just going to start on one side rather than the very end. Okay, so there is our zip finished on this side, and there's our little opening. Let's flip the fabric back around. We need to fold this pocket piece up to meet this edge here, and we're going to sew along this edge, across here and down here, but you do need to move the outer fabric out of the way. So what I'll do is pin that in place so that it doesn't shift on me. I'll turn the fabric around with the right side faced up, fold that out of the way, and I'll sew that edge. We'll fold this out of the way, remove those pins now, sew across this edge here, and then we'll fold that out of the way as well, and we'll sew down there. So up the short side, across the long edge, and down the short side again, and just make sure that your outer fabric is well out of the way. Okay, now that we have our finished pocket for the outside of our bag, we've also done the lining pocket, we can now start putting the bag pieces together. Let's get our other zip. This one needs to be a little bit longer than the width of your fabric, and I'm going to take my double-sided tape once again, run that right across. You can make these bags with a regular dress zip, and I'll find a link to one of my other big bags that have regular dress zips in there, so if you prefer to use that, you can. We're going to place our zip right side down and secure that in place right along the top edge, and then we'll get another bit of tape and run that along the top, and that will be for the lining. So let's take the lining piece. We've got one side that has a pocket on it and the other one that doesn't. The lining side that doesn't have the pocket is going to be faced right side down over the top here, because I'd like to have a pocket on the opposite side on the inside of the bag. So I'm going to line up the side edges first, and then bring the fabric up to the top and line that up evenly along there. I'm going to remove the other side of my zip, so that one's secured in place. We can turn the fabric around, and we'll grab the other side of the zipper tape and some more double-sided tape, run that right along the edge again, and just be careful with the teeth here. You want the teeth faced down, you want the straight edge of your zipper tape facing the top edge. Sometimes I do this upside down and then I have to unpick it all. And one more bit of tape, and the other end of the lining. Once again, line up the sides and then line up the top. And we can take both ends to the machine and we'll sew all the way down those edges, then turn it the right way around and we'll top stitch. And before we turn it the right way out, we'll do the other side. Once you've got this the right way out, we've got our lining to the back, the outer fabric on the front. It's nicely lined up on the side edges. We can go along and top stitch. You don't need to top stitch too close to the top edge here. You can come down a little bit further. There's a lot of bulk here, so it's actually nicer to come down probably about just under 1/4 of an inch. And we'll do the same on the other side. Okay, so far we've got our lining, the opening here, our zips installed, that's the outer fabric, and we've done our external pocket. Let's bring the zipper sides together, and I'll be putting 2 sliders onto this one. Because it's such a big bag, I'd like these zips to open away from each other. If you're using a regular zip, you'll just have one and that'll be fine as well. So what I'm going to do here is line up this edge of the fabric. Doesn't matter that my zipper teeth aren't lined up. I want this lined up, and then I'll trim this back so the teeth are lined up evenly. I'll pop the slider on with a curved edge facing me. And by having the zipper teeth lined up evenly when I've started, I want them to be lined up evenly to enable me to line this up evenly. So that's nice and even. We'll come up to the other end. And my fabric's not quite lined up here, but that's fine. I do want my zip to be nice and even along here. I'll lay the 2 sides out flat beside each other, trim that so that my teeth are even at the top, and I'll pop the other slider with the curved edge facing me on the end, line up the ends of the zipper tape again, push it, and I can see that one side is stepped up a little bit higher than the other. That's going to kink the zip when the ends meet, so I'll try again. That's much better. So that's nice and even. When I bring the 2 pulls together here, it's not kinked one way or the other. I'll bring that to the centre. Leave an opening at this point. If you forget to do that, it's going to be a real bugger to try and open up your bag later. Okay, now that we've done that, we can grab the 2 tab ends that we prepared earlier, and we'll just place that directly over the top of the zip here. Clip that in place, but you don't want the back fabric clipped together at all, just the front section. And we'll do the same on this side. Pop your hand in underneath there and centre that webbing across your zip, and we'll stitch that in place. So what I'm going to do here is just fold the back section of the fabric out of the way, and I'm still using my number 90 universal needle, or the size 14. So I've got my zipper teeth and the fabric, and then 2 layers of webbing, and sew across. This will be done with about 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I've triple stitched that in place, and I'll repeat that for the other side. Move that fabric out of the way. The trick to not breaking needles when you go over this much fabric is to go slow, and also hand crank if you need to. Okay, so we have our tabs secured on the end of our bag now, and that's also secured the ends of our zipper tape. So that means our sliders can go anywhere they like now. They're not going to come off. So we do want to leave a big opening, but we don't want to have our pulls all the way out to the end at this stage. Let's separate the lining fabric from the outer fabric. Lay your pocket out flat. We've got the seam that's at the bottom of our lining right along here, and you want this seam to line up with the center of the zip here. So you can see the center right along there, which is where the teeth are. We'll have that stitching line right along the middle, And for now, all I've done is clipped the layers together of the lining, not the outer fabric. For the other end, I'll do the same. Line up that seam with the centre of the zip, flip it over. So that's our lining here and on this side. Now we can just roll this fabric across and distribute it evenly across the fabric, so that if you turn it around and have a look, the lining and the outer fabric will line up. So the lining here and the outer fabric meet up here and here and on the other side. Once you're happy with all of that, then you can just clip all of the layers together. Coco's in here snoring her head off. Now we need to box our corners. Some people ask me, why do I box my corners at this stage rather than at the beginning? Well, when I did my first bag, I did the box corners at the beginning and it didn't line up perfectly. And there are lots of things that can cause that. The size of the zip you use, whether you use a number 3 or a number 5, the seam allowance that you use, and even the way you sew your zips in will make a difference in how your fabric lines up. So if you cut your box corners out before you've done all of that, those things can affect how everything lines up. And it's for that reason that I prefer to cut my box corners out at this stage. I can see my pocket on this side here. So when I determine where my box corners are going to be, I need to take these things into account. If I box my corner and only do a 1-inch box, geez, Coco's having a really good snore, then this pocket is going to sit up and fold around the top of the bag, and it makes it useless because you can't get in and put anything inside the pocket. Likewise with this pocket here, I want the front pocket to sit on the straight, not on the top or on the fold. So I can't have my pocket on a fold, otherwise it'll make my bag look a bit silly. Okay, with all the fabric pieces lined up, the first thing we're going to do is sew up our side seams. We'll go and do that now, and this is a 1 centimetre seam allowance. When we go over this section where the zip and the webbing are, I'm going to triple stitch over that entire area. Because I know that I'm going to be doing a 3-inch box corner, from the folded edge, I'm going to place a mark on each of my corners. I'll sew along and then I'll back stitch along here, come across to the centre, and I'll triple stitch across that area where there's so much bulk, come down to here, and I'll back stitch here. And that will secure those edges so that when I cut my corners later, I can box the corners without everything unravelling. And I'll do the same on this side as well. Just double check that the D-ring is well out of the way of your fabric and that it's not pushed up like this or even folded over. If you don't watch that, you'll end up breaking your needle. On the other end, we'll do the same. Okay, the side seams are done. There's very little to go now. All we have to do is box our corners and close up our bag. We can trim off any excess zipper tape. To box the corners, we're going to measure 3 inches from the folded edge, which is these long edges. And then from this side edge, we're going to measure 3 inches from the stitching line. I've got my stitching line coming down along here. If I continue that line, that will be my stitching line. From that line, I'm going to measure 3 inches or 8 centimetres, and that's the size of the box corner that we'll be cutting out. So if you have a 3-inch template or a square, you can line up the 3-inch line along the folded edge and along the stitching line and just mark your box. Once you've done that, we can cut out the corners. Just make sure that you don't have anything in the way that shouldn't be in the way. Now that we've done that, we're going to go into the opening of our bag, double check for a start that you have left an opening there, but I'm also going to open my zip out all the way, and by doing that it's going to make it easier for me to manipulate my lining when it comes time to bringing my box corners together. Pinch the corners out of your outer fabric, and then you can start clipping that together. Go to the other corner here, clip that together as well, and you can see that that's sitting nice and straight right across there. If you had cut the fabric out right at the very beginning, you'd quite possibly have the fabric kinked up a little bit like this. It's not the end of the world, but it's much easier if you can do them neatly at the end. We've done the outer fabric with the lining fabric that's attached on the same side. Bring your fabric around, and you've really got to just manipulate everything. It's a matter of holding your tongue the right way. So we'll take the corner here, line that up evenly, and then we're going to place those edges together. So we've got the lining fabric and the outer fabric. Clip it all together. Grab the other corner. And sometimes the lining isn't quite even, but it's much more important to have the outer fabric looking good compared to the lining. It's much more forgiving on the inside. Normally I would do all 4 corners all at once, but we'll take this one to the machine so you can see how it's assembled, and then we'll come back and do the other 3. So I'll back stitch here. When I get to the bump where the seams meet, I'll be triple stitching there. Because there's so much bulk in this fabric, I'll actually do this whole side twice. So I've secured all those layers together, but just for good measure I'll go and sew them in place again. Just because I'm using regular Gutermann sewing thread, I'm not using a thicker thread. To save on costs and having to have lots of different types of thread, I'm happy just to stitch everything twice. So that side's nice and secure. I've got all the layers together. By sewing the box corners and the outer fabric together, it means that on the inside of the bag you don't have any risk of the lining coming to the outside again. And now we'll do the other 3 corners. So instead of doing them one at a time, we will just line everything up, clip it all together, and sew it at the same time. So it gets a little bit fiddly when you're doing these because there's not much movement in the fabric. But it's really easy once you get the hang of it. And we've got one more corner to go. And now we're going to sew up those last 3 corners, and then all we need to do is turn it the right way out and close it up. All right, We are now ready to find our way into the bag, turn it the right way out, and then we can close up the opening in the bottom. To close up that opening, we've got that crease that we pressed earlier. Just bring those edges together and we can sew straight across here. I'll quickly go and do that now. Alright, that's been closed up and now we can finish neatening up the bag. There we go, everything's been tidied up. I've put a couple of little zipper pulls on here. Makes it easier to grab hold of and just pull the zips open. There's the inside of our bag. We've got the pocket on the inside there. Nice and spacious. And I like the zip opening up all the way down because it does mean that you can actually open the bag all the way and see everything that's in there. And we've got our zippered pocket on the front. Spacious pocket there. And all we need to do now is put our shoulder strap on. And we have a perfectly functional crossbody satchel. Kind of like that. And whilst I was at it, I decided to go crazy. That's the one I've shown you today. And I've also gone and made not one, but 7 of these crossbody satchels. Different fabric pieces on the inside. And this one here is another pattern again. This one's even wider, so you can see the difference. It was a longer piece of fabric to begin with and about the same width. So you can make these with any size fabric pieces that you like. Oh, and there's another one here, and then there's a couple more that I've done as well. How did you like all those bags? I cannot believe I've made so many of them. My back is absolutely killing me. I've been sitting at the machine for the past day and a half working on the video and all of these bags. I think they've come up pretty well. I'm really happy with the sizing, the zippered pockets at the front and on the inside as well, and even the carry handle was nice. Well, that was nice and easy anyway. So lots of different colours. This one's a little bit fatter going across. All of the bags are exactly the same style. They just have slightly different sized fabric pieces. And this one here was the original one. No pockets in those, but the technique for making them is exactly the same. So it really doesn't matter whether you use 1 or 2 pieces of fabric to begin with for your for the outer bag, and it also doesn't really matter about the size of the fabric either. The box corners, of course, will determine how much space you lose in the width of your bag. But when you start off with a fabric that's nice and wide like this, you've got plenty of room to play with. I think I like this colour. It's one of my favourites, but then I kind of like this one as well. I did make one mistake when I made them. I don't know what I'm going to do about that. When I put the pockets in, I've actually put this pocket in upside down. So I might hand sew the bottom of the pocket in place and then unpick the top section. I think that's probably the only thing that I can do, unless I take the pocket out completely. That was just a silly mistake. I shouldn't try to rush everything that I do. So these took me from start to finish, cutting out the fabric, making the pockets, installing the zips. Everything took me just over 1 hour to make them. These days I'm charging my time out at $60 an hour because I think I'm worth it. And the material that I've put into this bag is probably about $15 worth of material or things that I've had to pay for. So the D-rings, all the bag hardware, the zips, the webbing, and the stabilizers as well. You know, I don't pay for the fabric because it's all donated, and I pay that forward when I sell my bags, so nobody ever pays for the free fabric that I receive. but I do charge for the stabilizers and all of the other bits and pieces that I pay for. The time to process fabric is incorporated in my labor charge. These bags that don't have zips inside or outside, I'm selling those for $55 each, and I'll continue to do that. And they also don't take me anywhere near as long to make. I think I can make these in just over half an hour. These ones, just over an hour, so say $60 for labour. I'm going to add another $15 to that for the material that I've purchased. It'll just about cover all of that. So these bags I'm going to put on my website for $75 each. Of course, they'll come with the shoulder strap as well. But I think $75 is a good fair price, and I'll see how they go. Will I make these again? I don't know. I know they look good with the pockets, but they're extremely time consuming to make. And I'm going to find that I won't get as much product made because I'll be putting too much work into those sorts of details. I can't afford that time, so I think in future I will probably make them all similar to this, but I'm going to wait and see what happens. Actually, you guys can tell me. $55 for the bag without pockets, $75 for the bag with pockets. Which do you think is going to sell better? Which one would you prefer? I think I'll be guided by what everybody else has to say about these, and also the sales as well. I'm going to put all of these up on my website. I'll put the other ones up on my website as well. Hopefully I'll get that done tomorrow. I think, yeah, the sales will guide me, and your opinions will also guide me as to whether or not I go to the trouble of making these with pockets or leave them without. I don't think I have anything more to say other than I hope you've enjoyed this video. Oh yes, I do have something more to say. I've made 7 of these bags in the last day and a half or so. It's the 7th of January now. This year so far, I've made 37 bags, counting these ones. I'm going to try and keep a tally of the amount of bags or products that I make this year. So it'll be really interesting to see how many products I make, especially compared to how many products I actually sell by the end of the year. I think that'll be a cute little experiment. Let's see how much I can sew. Now I think I've finished talking. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I shall catch you next time. Bye for now.